Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm UTC President and CEO Rusty Williams, and I want to thank you for joining us today for this special edition of the UTC podcast that we call the C-Suite Conversations. In these special episodes, we talk to executive leaders of many of the UTC associate members to get a better understanding of what's going on in their companies and around the industry. On this episode, I'm happy to welcome as our guest Seán Adam of AFL. Seán has been with AFL for about 15 years in various technology roles, including AFL's Test and Instrumentation Division. But as of a few months ago, Seán has now become the Vice President of Corporate Strategy for AFL. Seán, it's great to have you with me today on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Rusty. It's a privilege to be chatting with you.
Yeah, this is always a fun time when we get to talk to some of our associate members about what's going on, right? And we all have our different parts of the world and the industry that we work with. And
Absolutely.
it's good for, I think, for me personally, but for our members as well to hear from people they don't normally hear from. Yeah, I just very briefly hit, a couple of things there, how long you've been at AFL and, so forth. But why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit more about yourself? How long you've been
Sure.
around the industry and, what your trail, so to speak, is, and kind of give them a better
Yeah.
idea of the credentials you have for being in this industry and being here with us today.
There we go. There we go. All right. Well, so first, actually, I live up in the Boston area. So born and bred here, went to school here. So I live up here with my wife and my son. I'm actually schooled as an electrical engineer. So that's actually my background. And to be honest, I actually spent half my career, so the other 15 years, as it turns out, in the semiconductor space. So I actually started out designing test equipment to test all the chips that happen to be in our phones and our computers. So that's actually really where I started. Then 15 years ago, I joined AFL, and it was really actually to run the R&D for test and inspection. So kind of test was the connection. To be honest, it was my first foray into telecommunications and into optical fiber. I think the last time I had done anything with optics prior to joining AFL was my SATs coming out of high school. So it had been a bit. And I'm not sure actually I got the questions right, by the way, but I've gotten much better at it over the last 15 years. And then, as you mentioned, I've been, it's my privilege now to actually help AFL kind of guide really where our corporate strategy is going.
Yeah, there's been a lot of turnover and changes within AFL over the last few years. I
Absolutely.
know. But let me go back to your involvement there in the test and inspection part of the business for AFL. I know a lot
Yep.
of people don't know that AFL is involved in that. I mean, in the utility industry specifically, they're known for cable, right, or
Right. Right.
accessories, right? But there are other parts of the business there that AFL's been involved with or still involved with. Um, so talk about a little bit about the test equipment, test and inspection part of that business. How AFL got involved in that, and how successful, and not monetarily, but
Sure.
just from a market presence perspective, how they are competing in that arena, if you
Sure,
will.
sure, sure, sure. Absolutely. So it actually came into AFL actually long before I joined and before you were there as well, where through an acquisition of a company called Noise, so Noyes, which was a startup actually based up in New Hampshire. And so that's actually how it kind of came into the AFL family, and really it was viewed as the fact of how do we kind of provide a more complete solution to our customers, right? So as you said, we're known for optical cable, and really we've actually spent our kind of the last 40 years continuing to kind of build on the solutions that we provide, and one of those things is actually the ability to test the optical fiber and to inspect it. Kind of goes hand in hand with our parent company is Fujikura, and they actually have the world leading splicer, right? And so they kind of fits with that. So really, actually, the test and inspection division has done a really nice job, kind of growing over the years, very much targeting the markets that we serve, which is broadband, data centers, and the utility space. And so got a good strong presence in OTDRs. Right, is really kind of a key differentiating solution we
Hmm.
have against some of the other folks, and so it's really done a nice job, and it really actually provides a good complement to the other products we provide.
Yeah, the one thing I liked about AFL, and this is when I was a customer, and while I was there for a while, and then looking at it from where I sit today, is AFL's done a good job of building that portfolio of products and services that are very complementary to each other, right? And so a lot of it you look and it makes sense as cables or it's the splice enclosures or it's test equipment or it's the other stuff. But there's a few other things that are not quite as easily understood or can you connect the dots, but again, AFL looks for those, opportunities, and we're
Right.
all in the business to make money, right? But we're also looking for things to help our customer base as well. And you mentioned
Absolutely.
it a little bit, but the customer base, which started 40 years ago as pretty much complete utility customer base, today is pretty varied, isn't it? So, what kind of market presence does AFL have, not only in the utility space, but out in, the different industries, the different markets?
Sure. Right. So we really kind of today look at the industry through kind of really three distinct market segments. So one, as you said, is the utility space, right? It's where we started. It's kind of our foundation. And definitely, not surprising, we have a very strong presence there, certainly through our optical ground wire products. We were really the first one to bring it into the US grid, and we've built on that over the years. One of those weird things you might say, it's kind of hard to connect into what might be thought of as a optical fiber company is our conductor accessories business, right? So where we actually also have really all the accessories you need for attaching conductors or into substations and in the transmission grid. So that's one of those ones where we added that on to actually provide a better solution to our end customers. But then, we then, after energy, kind of moved into what you might view as the traditional broadband space. So that's the carriers, right? That's going to be your large telcos and your large, MSOs. And so really have actually kind of built out a presence in that space here in North America. And then really kind of over that, maybe kind of think about it over the last decade or so, we entered into the hyperscale data center business. And we actually have a global position there. And that's not surprisingly is probably one of the fastest growing segments we have, because it's actually one of the fastest growing segments probably in any industry
Just ask
in the world.
anybody in this space, right? That they can tell you
Yep.
that that's a big needle mover in this industry.
Absolutely. And that's a so we've got a very strong presence there, like I said, on a global stage. And it definitely has, kind of fits hand in hand with a bunch of the products and technologies that we've continued to innovate over the years.
Yeah, so you mentioned those different customer types, and I'm interested in how AFL works with those different customer bases because they are completely different in terms of what they want to see from, say, a customer experience, to use the trendy term, or what you guys would see back from them. How has AFL adapted to the demands of a hyperscaler versus the demands of a utility versus the demands of a traditional telco?
Sure.
Explain how that's different.
Yeah, exactly. And certainly it's been a learning experience, right? Because they are so different. And when you actually look at the hyperscale data center providers, they're really different, right? It's the sometimes I joke the fact it's a bit like it'd be a bit like my young son actually having like $1 billion bank account, right? And so they tend to move very quickly. They tend to change their minds very quickly. Where you look at the utilities, they tend to be a lot more kind of conservative. Think about risk in a different way. And the broadband providers tend to be a little bit in the middle, a little bit more towards kind of that utility side. And so what we've done is, what you really have to do in all these cases is really drive a very strong customer relationship and a intimacy with the applications they serve. And that's what we've done in all three. And so we actually have targeted like go to markets with each three and targeted supports that are really adapted to support those individual ones. You can't do it in a kind of peanut butter approach or a one size fits all. That'll we would fail, but worse, they would fail. And so we've really worked to adapt to make sure that when we think about coming up with solutions, it's not just like a technology solution, it's also a business solution, right? So how do we really best serve the customer? And so we really actually have kind of created it, point specific for each one of those. You look at that hyperscale data center space, that's a global market. And so there, that
Mhm.
means you actually have to have a global presence. That's global manufacturing, global sales, global application support, right? Very different than, let's say, supporting like, the utilities here in the US, right? So so we've worked to kind of make the right investments and the right choices for each one, and also kind of honing in on the fact that these are the three market spaces we want to do versus like, five, six, seven, eight market spaces where we just
True.
couldn't serve them well.
Right. So it's not the Walmart model of, transactional only. And you hit a big point that I think a lot of people miss until you get into the supplier side of the business. I mean, it's really about relationships,
Right.
right? You got to understand what these potential customers are going through, what kind of problems they have, where they're going strategically, and then be able to help them be successful, which helps the suppliers be successful. You mentioned
Absolutely.
that wide range of potential customers. And the AFL, again, as we said earlier, has got this pretty broad portfolio of products. And we haven't talked about services yet. We'll do that at some point here before we get finished. But some of your products are kind of niche products. You got in some light rail. I'm assuming you're still in some of the light rail business, maybe not. I know you have in the past. But when you
Right.
look at the little pieces of it, how does AFL go through the process of determining what kind of products they want to develop and bring into the marketplace? I mean,
Sure. Sure.
it's not just willy nilly. I know, and there's got to be a
Right.
process there. I was curious if you could explain that somehow.
Sure, right. And I think it's kind of one of the ways that we've really evolved, over the 15 years that I've been here. If I kind of turn the clock back to when I joined, we were a bit more kind of kind of more of a kind of a product or a product out mentality, which actually meant that you ended up having some of these really kind of odd ones that you'd have. It's kind of, well, maybe it's an interesting product to go do. And really over the 15 years, we've very much become more strategic in our approach, and what that's allowed us to do is by focusing in on understanding those markets, the applications, and the customers, we let that guide what are the products we're going to go after. So you're right, we used to have light rail, we actually don't anymore, right? It doesn't
Okay.
actually fit with the strategic direction that we've set. So it's been very much a honing of trying to be kind of like that Walmart approach, like you said, to really one that says, look, we view there to be, strong opportunity in these particular markets, right? And then how do we serve them best? And in serving them best, that helps guide our product portfolio, right? Actually, and when I say product portfolio, also our services portfolio, right? So it's really now that kind of guides the decisions that we make, whether that's a product we're going to make or a product that we'll partner with somebody else in helping bring to the market.
Yeah, and even the services side of the business, there's evolution there as well, right? Because it depends
Absolutely.
on what the customers are wanting help with, and those products and systems evolve over time as well. So let's talk a little bit about the industry. Again, this mostly telecom, and I'll say telecom is this as a generic term. And that continues to evolve as
Absolutely.
well. But there's still, stuff out there. There's still wires. There's still, basic needs for, communications, whether it's utilities or others. But, we can't sit still. So when you look down your strategic pipeline, not to give away any trade secrets here, but what sounds like or appears to be kind of the next big thing from a telecom perspective? What areas do you see, 5 years out, 10 years out that you need to be preparing for now that'll be a big deal for those of us that are around that time?
Sure, sure, sure. So, what you've got is, and it's kind of an interesting thing when you look at the three markets that we serve, is that as time has gone on, the walls around them have become very fuzzy, right? At one time you would have sat there and said, I've got the power utility space, I've got the data center space, I've got the broadband space, and they're kind of separate. And what you see now is they are increasingly becoming intertwined, right? And so that ends up kind of making for it's certainly exciting for AFL to be at that juncture of these markets that we serve, and they actually have that intertwining, and you can actually start looking for solutions that address kind of start to address that intersection. But I'd say, kind of, Rusty, one of the things that we see today, and I expect it to hold for the next decade, it's very much about speed. Whether with any one of these markets, right? In utility space, we call it time to first kilowatt. In the hyperscale data center space, we refer to it as time to first megawatt. Maybe we should actually say time to first gigawatt as things go on. And it's very much about actually how do you service the customer at scale and speed with quality. So that's now just become kind of table stakes, right? But then as I look at the fact of where's this kind of telecom space going, it is going to be ever increasing levels of density in bandwidth that can be achieved in a number of ways, certainly through additional fiber count, certainly through additional wavelengths. But being able to address that additional density while at the same time making it easier for the customers to get the product, so speed to delivery, and then deploy the product, right? So speed the deployment. And so, what I would say from a technology point of view, as we look at it, you're gonna see that increased density. You've seen it where we've taken, we've taken like the fiber that we have in OPGW from 250 micron down to 200 micron, and that's actually allowed us to have a significant density increase in OPGW as an example. Same thing across all of our cable lines. You're gonna start to see multi-core fiber, right? So a fiber that actually
Okay.
has 4 cores in it, right? And that now allows that 4x density in the exact same OD. You're going to start to see some deployments of hollow core, right? So a very, very different technology, right? That is very much around reduction of latency. So that will be kind of niche on the broader level, but definitely key as you look at, especially you look at kind of the data center interconnect space that is being addressed by certainly today by the hyperscalers and by the broadband players. That's a place where those are intersecting. So that's another
Right.
key thing kind of I expect to see let's say over the next decade.
Yeah, and we hear that, again, sitting in my seat and being, the different companies that are involved with UTC, we see a lot of that. And it's about, you said, it's about I'll call it capacity. It's
Yep,
speeds and bandwidths and other things. But it's also a push to simplicity as best you can. So it's not
100%.
while you're making it bigger and faster, you don't want to make it more complicated. But then throw
Exactly.
on top of that some, capability to have systems manage your network. Call it
Yep.
automation, call it what you want to call it. And again, as you think through, you talked a good bit about the hyperscalers, but in general, we're seeing, artificial intelligence type capabilities introduced into these systems because you've got bigger, better, faster. You don't have a 24 count fiber cable anymore. You've got, whatever the right number is, 1,000
Yep.
fibers in a
Yep.
cable, and all the data that's pumping through. So, what's your viewpoint on, the application of, I'll say, AI based capabilities that are introduced into all three of the markets you guys are involved with?
Sure, sure, sure. Right. And that's that is the really interesting thing is the fact of, and this is where these three markets have that intersection, AI and AI data centers is one of the key drivers for load growth, as we know here in the United States, and that puts that burden on the utilities to try to keep up with that. And as that happens, and as their grid becomes more complex, and they have more data to deal with, well, what's a way to solve that? AI, right? And then AI unlocks the ability to actually put even more intelligence into, let's say, the grid. So it actually ends up being, it's a positive feedback loop, right?
Hmm.
Is what kind of what
Yeah.
you have. It's like each thing is actually driving the fact of now I can do more and more. And it's actually why the communication infrastructure is so absolutely critical. Um, it's because kind of AI allows for the deployment of more devices, let's say, into the grid that allows the utilities to have a better kind of real-time view of the grid, which they need because the grid has become more complex,
Right.
right? It's that's unlocked through kind of these optical technologies that we've talked about. Um, and what I see is, one of the interesting things that certainly we've seen is trying to understand, let's specifically kind of the challenges of our utility customers is the utilities don't lack for data. They actually have way too much data in many ways, right? They just can't act on all of it. AI will let them
Right.
do that. AI also will let them start to kind of break down those silo walls that exist with the fact of, well, this particular sensor gives information this way and this one gives it that way, right? Can actually AI I think actually has an opportunity to break those down and then allow there to actually be this really kind of creation of a singular view of the grid, which I think is a challenge utilities have. And as they have that, that again will allow them to deploy more stuff. You'll need a better network, um, right? Very, very, and for the data center providers, um, what they need to do is, for them, AI is kind of what's driving their investments. But to make all that possible, you've got to have this strong, not only a strong optical infrastructure inside the data center, but now actually strong optical infrastructure between the data centers, right? And
Right.
that's actually where you see the data center providers having a closer relationship with the broadband providers, and actually I think an opportunity to work with the utilities in a different way than just supplying power.
Yeah, we actually, sitting where we sit, we've gotten a couple of phone calls from some of these large hyperscalers uh, to that very point, right? Hey, we're wanting to build a campus in this region, and we need a third level backup,
Right,
connectivity between, these buildings on this campus. Can you introduce us to the local power company? We understand
yep,
they have fiber. So that
right,
is a part of it. But the biggest challenge I've had, and we've done a couple of things, white papers, and I've done one kind of theoretical podcast about AI. The biggest thing to remember for me is AI is not the end product, right? It's not
no,
something in and of itself. It's a
right,
tool, right? It's something to help us get to that point. And you said it exactly right. I mean, for those of us that have been around a long time, when we first started doing, say, distribution SCADA, you have two or three data points on a distribution feeder. One's at the
yep,
substation breaker and one's out on a recloser somewhere. And now you're talking about thousands of data points with the ability to talk to every house's, the meter on the side of every house or
yep,
every street light or all the other things, right? And so being able to, you said it very well, just being able to manage that data and make some sense out of it, I think is going to be key going forward. So, and you combine that with workforce issues that
yep.
we're seeing coming down the road. We're going to have to find ways to do that, to implement those kind of technologies. And we're beginning to see companies in this industry develop the software products. And the software management systems have been around as long as I've been around, but it's a
Yeah.
different animal these days to be able to take advantage of that. And I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
I 100% agree, and I think the way I always refer to it, because by the way, I'm trained as an electrical engineer, but I will say kind of most of my career has really been based on designing systems, so tend to be actually the integration of hardware and software, right? And so I think what AI has the ability to do by bringing together these different these different sense of control elements, right? And really kind of letting you abstract away from exactly how they're implemented, you can achieve kind of what I refer to as a single pane of glass, right? The fact
Right.
that a utility or a carrier can look at like a single screen and be getting the information they need, even though it actually might be, you might be getting doing DLR with three different types of sensors that are out there, and it doesn't matter, right? Because really, what's been brought back up to in this particular case, the worker in the utility who's in the control room is the fact of, well, what's important about the DLR? It's not the fact it's this sensor doing it. It's the fact of I'm getting this information that says here's how much capacity I could be putting down that cable. That's the information. That single pane of glass, right, is really what will let that ease be there, faster response, right, enable the workforce. AI is an enabler to that. It's not the end goal, but it is unlocking this ability for these software systems to really start to really provide that kind of one point of touch and one point of view of what's being controlled. So
Yeah, and there's one thing for sure, that whatever kind of equipment is put out there, whether it's handheld devices, it's large computing infrastructures, and whatever, you're going to have that networking connectivity capability right out there to make all of that work regardless, and that's great for
absolutely.
what all of us do. So every time that we have somebody come on, Seán, I try to end in something that's a little less technical. So
Cool.
as we're recording this, we're in between the Thanksgiving holiday and the Christmas holiday. So,
Yep.
all right, let me ask you a couple of questions, completely off topic. All right.
Sounds good.
Turkey or ham guy?
Turkey.
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 Yeah, I was
Great.
going to give you the option to go something else. I
No, no,
hear.
no.
Yeah, I like turkey as well. I eat ham all year long, but I'm a big turkey guy. So
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how it is in New England. I haven't got into this kind of conversation with someone from that part of the world. You call it dressing or you call it stuffing?
Stuffing.
Stuffing. And
Yep.
so is it really stuffed or is it just what you call it?
It's a
That made
good
this really
question.
weird, right? I'm sorry about
Good,
that.
good question. So it could be stuffed, but generally it's actually made in a separate pot.
Yeah. Well, it's in my part
So
of the world, it's dressing in the South.
gotcha.
But yeah, stuffing, we don't know what that is. All right. So you said you're from the Boston area. So I hate to
Yep.
ask you this, but I don't know if you follow football at all. But,
Yep.
Thanksgiving Day, there's always a Cowboys game
Yep.
and a Lions game. So do you care
Yep.
about that at all? Or do you wait for whatever day the Patriots are playing?
Well, it's the certainly actually that's the absolute right answer, right? So the if the Patriots aren't playing, does it really matter? But I actually did watch I did watch the games on Thanksgiving with the with family, and so I have to admit I got a soft spot for the Lions more than let's say the Cowboys. Maybe that's just because the Cowboys always used to be kind of America's team. That's how it was growing up. And since I grew up with the Patriots during the Grogan years, that was a really sad time for me. And so I didn't like anybody else. And
Yeah,
so
we all have to go through those times. All right.
yep.
So the last question. So do you guys have some sort of tradition around the holidays that if anybody else was looking in at it, they're going, "What in the world are they doing?"
Yeah, yeah. So we kind of do. So every year we actually make we make actually a Yule log. So it's a part of a tree from usually our yard, decorated up with kind of greenery from around or kind of the woods around us and winterberry. And like I said, it's myself, my wife, my son. So we put three candles and we light them every night during the season. And on New Year's Eve we take that, we put it in the fireplace. Each of us write down on a slip of paper kind of what we are, kind of our hopes and dreams for the year to come, and put them in the little spots where the candles had sat, and then we actually light
Right.
it on fire.
Ah,
And so it's kind of a tradition that we have. That's it's always interesting when we go through the year to say, kind of what I had hoped and asked for this past year. It
ah.
it really happened. And
Well,
so,
that's really
so
great.
that's a tradition we started. probably over a decade or so. And so it's I'll be making the Yule log actually this weekend.
All
So
all right. Well, and again, your traditions, it doesn't really matter as much what they are, but you have those traditions.
right,
Right.
exactly.
And we have two daughters that are grown and starting their own families now, but they're all about the tradition. So don't change. Whatever it is you do,
Nope,
whether it's goofy or not, you can't change. All right. Well,
absolutely, absolutely.
I appreciate that. Well, Seán, thanks for taking some time to talk to me today. First, I want to thank you for your involvement, but also AFL's involvement in UTC. I know you guys have been a member of UTC for a long time, and I just want to thank you, from a corporate perspective, but thank you for taking some time today to have this conversation.
Awesome, awesome, Rusty. I appreciate it. I really I thank you for the opportunity. So we truly we get a lot out of actually being part of UTC, and it's actually a privilege for us to be part of it. So I wish you and actually the entire audience a phenomenal holiday season and really actually a safe and happy New Year. So
Thank you very much, sir. Well, all right, that will do it for this edition of the C-Suite Conversations. I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast, be on the lookout for the various podcasts that we publish each month, and I look forward to seeing you somewhere down the road.